fellow Americans.
You might be wondering, why in the world is there a 30-minute countdown before the show starts? Well, we actually start live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, so this whole 30-minute countdown is a chance for YouTube and Rumble to send out their alerts and notifications, so we encourage you to gather up and hang out with everyone in the chat room. So every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time is when we do this show live. You can join us for the countdown if you like, or just set your clock and reminder that at 4 p.m. Eastern is when we go live. You can also make sure you subscribe and turn on that bell notification, so hopefully you will get a notification.
What do you have to say about dictators of countries like Indonesia, who we sell weapons to, yet they are slaughtering people in East Timor? What do you have to say about Israel, who is slaughtering Palestinians, who impose martial law? What do you have to say about that? Those are our allies. Why do we sell weapons to these countries? Why do we support them? Why do we bomb Iraq when it commits similar problems?
There are various examples of things that are not right in this world, and the United States is trying. I really am surprised that people feel that it is necessary to defend the rights of Saddam Hussein, when what we ought to be thinking about is how to make sure that he does not use weapons of mass destruction.
I'd like to...
Who are shouting, just a moment.
I'm not defending them in the least. What I am saying is that there needs to be consistent application of U.S. foreign policy. We cannot support people who are committing the same violations because they are political allies. That is not acceptable. We cannot violate UN resolutions when it is convenient to us. You're not answering my question, Madam Albright.
You briefed the press, did you not, when you were there?
Well, I had several jobs. One of my jobs was that of analyst. I also was an interrogator and indeed briefed the press when we, the CIA, wanted to circulate disinformation on a particular issue. Disinformation is not necessarily a lie. It may be a half-truth. And we would pick out a journalist. I would go do the briefing and hope that he would put the information in print.
What was your percentage of success?
We were pretty successful in planning information of a rather rarefied nature. For instance, if we wanted to get across to the American public that the North Vietnamese were building up their force structure in South Vietnam, I would go to a journalist and advise him that in the past 6 months, X number of North Vietnamese forces had come down the Ho Chi Minh Trail system through southern Laos. Now, there is no way a journalist can check that information. That's data derived from radio intercepts, spy in the sky photography. So either he goes with the information or he doesn't, and ordinarily or usually the journalist would go with it because it looked like some kind of exclusive. Go after these gentlemen. I would be directed to cultivate them, to spend time with them at the Caravel Hotel or the Continental Hotel, to socialize with them, and slowly but surely to try to gain their confidence by dolloping out valid information which was true. And then I would drop into a conversation the data that we wanted to get across which might not be true. One piece of data, for instance, that we managed to plant in the New Yorker magazine had to do with a supposed North Vietnamese effort in 1973 to develop airfields along the border of South Vietnam. The reason we wanted to plant this information was that we were trying to persuade the U.S. Congress that Saigon should continue to get a great deal of aid, and that the North Vietnamese were the chief violators of the ceasefire accord. That was printed in the New Yorker magazine under the byline of Robert Chaplin, as indeed was a great deal of such information which we tried to circulate.
Frank, a two-part question. What were the objectives of what was the objective of the CIA? What about the moral implications of what you were doing in feeding this information? Did the objective override the moral implications, moral problems?
Well, the objective of the agency in general is to generate intelligence and get it back to Washington, to get at the truth and make sure the policymakers understand it. When you plant disinformation, you are diverging from that objective, and I think probably in retrospect it was very counterproductive. I am, as an ex-CIA agent, opposed to the disinformation activities in which I was involved. I admit that I was involved, and I think it served no useful purpose. Propagandizing the American public or Congress is not the CIA's job. As to the morality of what the CIA was doing or that particular activity, the war was a very relative thing. It was a relativist environment, and morality seldom came into play when you were operating in the field. In my estimation, a CIA man should be amoral. That may sound pretty shocking to somebody, but what if my morality were that of a Nazi or agent, if you will? You wouldn't want me to be your intelligence officer. Keep the morals out of intelligence. Keep the truth in, and stay away from disinformation.
It would have been more appropriate for Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to address this House according to Article 144, an article which was specifically designed to debate violations of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, which is clearly the case with Mr. Trudeau. Then again, a Prime Minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
Colleagues, but the answer to war is not more war, it's peace. And peace isn't delivered by the barrel of a gun, it's delivered by diplomacy, by dialogue. You can wish away your continent's history, but we share a continent with Russia. We will sit down with Russia. There will be a negotiated peace, and this organisation should be promoting it earlier rather than delaying it and making sure that more Ukrainians die. Your feigning of sympathy rings hollow. It makes me sick, to be honest with you.
we become involved when disinformation poses a threat to the security of our country. It is when there's a connectivity to a threat to our country. It could be a threat, a connectivity to violence. And what this working group does, is precisely what I would think you would want it to do, which is to take a look at the work, the disinformation work that our department has done and ask the following questions. Do we have policies? Do we have guardrails? Do we have standards?
But here's the problem.
Ensure,
We can't even agree. We can't even agree what disinformation is. You can't even agree that it was disinformation, that the Russians fed information to the Steele dossiers. You can't agree to that. How are we ever going to come to an agreement on what is disinformation so you can police it on social media?
Senator, I have 2 points, if I may finish. Number one, that what this working group does, because it's not an office, what this working group does is ensure that there are guardrails, definitions, standards to make sure that the free speech rights, the civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy rights of individuals.
So do you think COVID disinformation threatens our national security?
And number two, if I may, Senator, and number two, is it your proposition that when the cartels spread disinformation with respect to our immigration policies to try to lure vulnerable migrants to our border illegally?
I think you've got no idea what disinformation is, and I don't think the government's capable of it. Do you know who the greatest propagator of disinformation in the history of the world is? The U.S. government. Are you familiar with MacGregor, the Pentagon Papers? Are you familiar with George W. Bush and the weapons of mass destruction? Are you familiar with Iran-Contra? I mean, think of all the debates and disputes we've had over the last 50 years in our country. We work them out by debating them. We don't work them out by the government being the arbiter. I don't want you guardrails. I want you to have nothing to do with speech. You think we can't determine, speech by traffickers is disinformation? You think the American people are so stupid they need you to tell them what the truth is? You can't even admit what the truth is with the Steele dossier. I don't trust government to figure out what the truth is. Government is largely disseminating disinformation.
Hey everyone, just as a reminder, our show starts at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, just a few minutes from now, but I should remind you that we have a daily newsletter. It's totally free. Natalie and I work very hard on it every morning over our cup of coffee, putting the stories together that we think are important that the mainstream media is going to ignore. All you need to do is go to our website. It's just redacted.inc. Put in your email address. We won't ever sell your email to anybody. And then you'll receive a welcome email. And all you need to do is verify that email, and 7 a.m. Eastern Time is when we send out our daily newsletter. And it's about 5 or 10 minutes in length that you can read it over your cup of coffee. And like I said, we cover 4 or 5 of the big stories of the day, plus a couple of things you might have missed while you were sleeping. We try to have some fun with it, add a little humor into it. And again, it's a great way to start off your morning. But it's also a great way for us to stay connected with you as well, because we've been banned and blocked on some of these platforms before, where we haven't been allowed to post anything, not even a community post. So the only way for us to stay connected with you is through our newsletter. We were able to send out a newsletter and say, hey everyone, we're blocked for the next week, and let you know what was actually going on with our show. Anyway, go to redacted.inc and sign up for the free newsletter, and it'll be posted first thing in the morning over your cup of coffee.
This is a bit of an aside, but in terms of how you think about problem sets, when I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CI director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire We had entire training courses.
We had a good discussion on ensuring global energy security and adequate oil supplies to support global economic growth. And that will begin shortly. And I'm doing all I can to increase the supply for the United States of America, which I expect to happen. The Saudis share that urgency, and based on our discussions today, I expect we'll see further steps in the coming weeks.
Are you worried about
One of the hopeful things that I've discovered is that nearly every war that has started in the past 50 years has been a result of media lies. The media could have stopped it if they had searched deep enough. If they hadn't reprinted government propaganda, they could have stopped it. But what does that mean? Well, that means basically populations don't like wars. And populations have to be fooled into wars. Populations don't willingly and with open eyes go into a war. So if we have a good media environment, then we'll also have a peaceful environment.
Killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed a million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war.
George,
after
if
what
I
you've
was
already
still in
done.
Parliament, I...
There can be no doubt that Saddam Hussein has biological weapons and the capability to rapidly produce more, many more. And he has the ability to dispense these lethal poisons and diseases in ways that can cause massive death and destruction. If biological weapons seem too terrible to contemplate, chemical weapons are equally chilling. UNMOVIC already laid out much of this, and it is documented for all of us to read in UNSCOM's 1999 report on the subject. If we consider just one category of missing weaponry, 6,500 bombs from the Iran-Iraq war, UNMOVIC says the amount of chemical agent in them would be on the order of 1,000 tons. These quantities of chemical weapons are now unaccounted for. Dr. Blick says, quipped that, quote, mustard gas is not marmalade. You are supposed to know what you did with it. We believe Saddam Hussein knows what he did with it, and he has not come clean to the international community. We have evidence these weapons existed. What we don't have is evidence from Iraq that they have been destroyed or where they are. That is what we are still waiting for.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the president now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the majors. The majors' assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So, now here's the deal. I recommended the president have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, I respectfully suggest they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. To decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone. Or to take the nation to war partway. Or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip. Because I think, and that's why I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did, we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector, you didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let him in, so what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Scott, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision. Same kind of decision General Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, they get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon, and one of the generals called me in. He said, sir, you got to come in and talk to me a sec. He says, we've made the decision we're going to war with Iraq. I said, we're going to war with Iraq? Why? He said, I don't know. He said, I guess they don't know what else to do. He said, I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we got a good military and we can take down governments. And he said, I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail. So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, are we still going to war with Iraq? And he said, oh, it's worse than that. He reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper. He said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, this is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran.
Hey Hey everyone, Clayton here. The show is going to start at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. I should remind you that we have a VIP community. It's our Redacted Rebel VIP community. Now, this show is totally free, what you're watching right now, right? You can subscribe here on YouTube and Rumble, totally free. But if you'd like to support independent journalism, we are run by you. Without you guys, we wouldn't be able to do this show. We wouldn't be able to hire the team that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the servers that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the reporters that we have, the team that we have. So you can support us by going to redacted.inc, and on the right side of your screen, you'll see a VIP community button. Just click that, and for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support us. We put out exclusive content, early interviews that no one else will see, live streams just for our VIP Rebel community. So again, it's totally free to watch this show. But if you do want to support independent journalism, we would really appreciate it. Come on over to redacted.inc, click on that community button, and decide if you want to sign up or not. It's totally up to you. We thank you. And meanwhile, the show will start in just a few moments at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome, everybody, to Redacted on this Monday. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natalie Morris.
Or Kathleen Turner with her Kathleen Turner voice.
Smelly cat. Smelly cat.
We have a very busy show for you on this Monday. We're going to get to Welcome to the Rebellion Arbor. We're going to talk about the war in the Middle East, and are we barreling towards war with Iran? A number of big indicators over the past 24 hours. Colonel Douglas MacGregor is going to join us here in a few minutes, and we're going to talk to him about where we are in this war.
Plus, the mainstream media and Washington is ditching Zelensky as their media darling, and it's amazing to watch how all of a sudden Ukraine is to blame for the Nord Stream pipeline. We're going to break down these many narratives and just how many lives it has cost to promote a fancy war and then leave that fancy war when it's no longer cool. It's terrible.
Also, would you be okay with a bunch of Army recruiters or military recruiters coming into your schools? And I'm talking like 7th grade, 8th graders. Hey, we're going to have an assembly today where you're going to learn about joining the military and having recruiters showing up at your school on a regular basis. Well, it's happening, and the Biden administration is trying to make it happen a lot more. So we're going to talk about all of that and so much more as Redacted starts right now. And Betsy in the chat, Betsy R says, I'm sorry. What man has I can't even say it.
Endometriosis?
Men shouldn't even be able to say it.
We're going to let you know about how a man in the UK is going to mansplain endometriosis because he is a health expert who prints out articles from the internet, and so he knows.
Trans man.
Yeah.
Trans woman.
It's a trans-identified man.
I can never keep them straight.
The way that we say it here on this show, because I don't feel like I should have to participate in other people's ideology, and so I will call them trans-identified, but then if I call them a man, that's their biology.
I was going to say, can we just say the biological man?
You can say that too.
Biological.
Yeah.
See, that's what I'm going to do. Biological man.
But a trans woman, then confuses the issue with the word woman. And so that's the language I use to be both respectful of ideology and my right to acknowledge who is and who isn't in my gender group.
Hey, we've got a lot of news to get to here on your Monday, but we do have a store. Can we tell you about the store? I know I threw a curveball on you there, Philip, but we have a store, and a bunch of you actually were so kind. You tagged us on Twitter with some of your new Redacted merch that you picked up, and that's what you can do. We are, David, what's our Twitter handle, or our X handle, I guess you call it? It's the Redacted INC.
At the Redacted News.
Oh, sorry. At the Redacted News on Twitter/X. So if you pick up any hoodies or T-shirts or mugs or stickers, the holiday season is coming up here. Tag us and let us know and take a picture of yourself. Some of our viewers did that, and we'd love to see that. It was really cool.
I'm sorry.
What's that?
I messed up. It's at the Redacted Inc. Sorry.
Okay, I was right. All right, then okay. So
yes,
what did I even ask? So it's, yes.
No dot, though.
Our Twitter handle is at the Redacted INC. But anyway, yes, we do have a Redacted store. Go to redactedstore.com. Pick up any T-shirts, hoodies, mugs, stickers. It supports the show. We don't mark up the prices at all. We really keep them as close to cost as possible. And it's great stuff for Christmas time. Any of the holidays coming up, grab one of your friends a mug that says, I don't let friends watch mainstream media, or any of the hoodies or the tumbler that Natalie's drinking out of tonight. So again, the redactedstore.com. Go to redactedstore.com. Well, is the United States preparing for a war in the Middle East, a broader regional war? Well, it sure as hell seems that way. We have warmongers like neocon Senator Lindsey Graham passing a bill to give power to the president to go to war in Iran, just in case he needs it. We're preemptively doing this homework for him. We're going to get these paperworks out there ahead of time. So will American families be okay sending their sons and daughters to fight and die for Israel, or to fight a war with Iran? That's the question. So is the United States heading for a broader regional war? What are the larger implications of all of this? Someone whose sources are impeccable and who has been spot on since the outbreak of the war in Ukraine, and of course what's been unfolding in the Middle East, is Colonel Douglas MacGregor. Colonel, great to have you back on the show. Great to see you.
Sure.
So are we headed, you see these moves in the Senate, you see these moves in the House of Representatives, preemptively giving the power to the president. You know, you need to go to war with Iran. Here's the paperwork. We've done the homework for you. Do you think a broader regional war is unfolding, or is this just fluff?
Well, I think the potential for a broader regional war is very, very real. What most of your listeners probably don't understand, or maybe they do, I hope they do, is that people like Lindsey Graham are out there essentially dishing for money. He makes these ridiculous statements, and he and Blumenthal sit down and craft legislation to do what you described, which is essentially, if you want to go to war with Iran, we're all for you. We'll do whatever you like. That means big donors pour money into their political action committees and support structures. They have no accountability in the Senate. They're not in charge of anything. They're not responsible for the armed forces. So it's all nonsense. When there is no accountability, people will say and do all sorts of stupid things. And that goes on all the time in Washington on the Hill. None of those people have responsibility for anything that happens in a war. They just vote for it. They send money and they pay no attention, and then they posture. So let's set that aside for a minute. The problem we have right now is that I don't think we have anybody in the White House. What we have are people in the cabinet like Blinken and Austin and others, and Sullivan, of course, as the national security advisor. And then behind them are lots of people that nobody knows. Some of them are huge donors to the Democratic Party, to the left. Some of them are just self-appointed experts that hold appointed but unelected positions, and they are steering the ship of state in bad directions. We are not interested in going to war in the Middle East. We weren't interested in going to war in Eastern Europe. But that's what it looks like right now, just as it looked that way, last fall in Eastern Europe. We wondered whether or not we were going to see a massive intervention in Ukraine. Now we're wondering about what we're going to do. The truth is, we are even less prepared now and less capable now of taking on a regional war, particularly a war that would involve virtually everyone in the region against Israel and the United States. What you're seeing right now with the Iranian leadership just met with President Erdogan of Turkey. This is after their foreign ministers met. They held discussions. We obviously are not privileged to what those discussions were about, but we do have some speechifying by President Erdogan, who points out the world is appalled by what is happening in Gaza, and we have nothing but silence from the United States and its Western allies. What is wrong with this? Now, the Iranian leadership is headed to Riyadh, to Saudi Arabia. These are the major players in the region. One cannot help but conclude that we're watching an alliance coalesce between all of these powers against what is happening with Israel and us. Meanwhile, we're attacking what we say are Iranian-backed Shiite militias and other targets, Syria, Iraq, elsewhere in the Middle East, on the assumption that they all take orders from Iran, which is not really true. They're still independent. The Iraqi militias are nationalist organizations. They may be Shiite, but they're still nationalists, and they're acting on their own. But even then, the little pinprick attacks that they're launching against U.S. positions are just that. They're more signals and warnings than anything else. But they're trying to alert people to the possibility that this could all turn dramatically in a moment's notice into a major war launched against Israel and us. So we send a couple of carrier battle groups. We add some more people on the ground in Syria and in Iraq. We add some air defense units to try and protect our forces from air and missile strikes if they're launched against us. But we're not ready for this, Morris. We don't have the ammunition. We don't have the logistical support structure in place. 2 carrier battle groups are supposedly there to deter. They're not going to deter anybody. They sit offshore in the ocean, very far from shore, because the closer they get to shore, the more danger they encounter. But we seem to think that this is sort of a battleship diplomacy. Either you stand down, or here are our new 21st century equivalents of battleships, even though it's a very old solution, carrier battle groups that we can launch 200, 300 cruise missiles. We can launch maybe 80, 90 aircraft at a stretch. But that's not going to win any wars. And the people ashore know that. And now they increasingly have reach and capability that didn't exist. I mean, the biggest problem that we don't seem to come to terms with, we didn't come to terms with it in Russia. We assumed that Russia was weak and incapable and could do nothing but respond to our demands. We got an education. You have a similar phenomenon in the region today of the Middle East. This is not 1973. This is 50 years later. All of these countries are more capable, both in terms of their populations that are better educated and more capable of acting decisively in uniform, but especially Turkey and Iran. These are nations of nearly 90 million people each. The Iranians have some of the best air and missile and space experts in the world. They've put together an arsenal of missiles that could dramatically destroy Israel if launched. Then you have the Turks. They can put 2 million men into the field in a month, and they have an excellent army. They also have new missiles in their arsenals that could easily destroy Israel and actually attack our offshore naval power, just as the Iranians do. And the populations in the region are 100% behind them. In other words, we're dealing with an entire region of people that is enraged at what is happening in Gaza. They went from saying that what Hamas had done was ugly and inappropriate, they'd gone too far and committed these atrocious crimes, to a point where they're now watching over 10,000 dead in Gaza, including thousands of children and women and old men. All of this is reaching them through television, through mass media, and they are enraged that no one is willing to step in, particularly the United States, and say, that's enough. And normally, that's what presidents have done historically. They've intervened and said, all right, you regain control of the Suez. Now you want to cross the Suez Canal? Negative. You cannot cross the Suez Canal. If you cross the Suez Canal in 1973, that could put us in a warlike status with Russia. Russia will not tolerate the destruction of Egypt. So the Israelis eventually ceased and desisted, pulled back over the Suez, and eventually we got an agreement. No one is intervening right now. No one is saying, wait a minute, what are you doing? You're just carpet bombing Gaza. I mean, it's way beyond, well, we're targeting what we think is Hamas. They're absolutely flattening the place and killing large numbers of people in the process. But right now, Mr. Netanyahu has far more influence and authority in Washington than President Biden. And that's a fact.
A few weeks ago, you said this, and I think it was spot on then, and I think we're seeing it unfold now. You said, quote, "You have an understandable and justified interest from Israel to destroy Hamas. However, I think the current plan will provoke an enormous reaction from the Muslim world. Pretty much everyone from Indonesia to Morocco is going to be extremely upset, and I think we will see the front against Israel in the region coalesce into a real military alliance against Israel. We need to protect Israel from itself, but you can," end quote, "but you can only, I think, lead a horse to water." And I think the frustration I've been seeing from a number of supporters of Israel is Netanyahu has now screwed himself, that they've gone a bridge too far. And this is now going to lead to the destruction of Israel by carrying out what is unfolded in Gaza. Going after Hamas, fine. Thousands of children being killed, not fine. The displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, not fine. There's secret plans drawn up to send 500,000 Palestinians to Canada, the Trudeau government. Well, 500,000 to Ireland, to the United Kingdom. I'm sure the Biden administration is making plans right now to have New York filled with Palestinians. So I think you were right about this. Have we failed to protect Israel from itself?
Oh, absolutely. No one is intervening to do that. On the contrary, I would compare this to the so-called blank check that was issued by the Kaiser to Vienna regarding the invasion of Serbia. That was really what sparked the second or the First World War. We've given Netanyahu a blank check and said, by all means, go for it. Now, there are people in Washington, inside the White House, who are afraid. what they've done is effectively open the cage door and release the tiger. And the tiger doesn't want to get back in the cage. The tiger wants to finish off everybody in the neighborhood. The tiger is Netanyahu, and he has concluded this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We have enormous control and influence over the United States, over its armed forces, its military power, its economic power, because the Israeli economy is being destroyed. Israel's in bad shape economically as a result of this war, but we can compensate for that. How do we compensate? We send billions of dollars over there to keep Israel afloat. So he says this is the perfect time for us to settle accounts. We'll wipe everybody out. And there's a certain amount of arrogance, assuming that no one in the region can act against us. And if they do, well, we have the United States. Of course, no one bothered to ask, is it in the interest of the United States to be drawn into a regional war that would involve the Turks, the Iranians, as well as all of the Arab states? I don't think it is. But when you bring that up, people scoff and say, oh, that could never happen. The Shiites hate the Sunnis. The Turks and the Iranians will never cooperate. The Arabs have always been poor at organizing and cooperating. Egypt has nowhere else to go. They need us. They're not going to abandon us. And frankly speaking, the keystone in the edifice of peace in the region is really Egypt. Egypt has maintained an excellent set of relations with Israel for 50 years. If Egypt defects, and that's not impossible because right now in the streets in Cairo, my contacts over there tell me that people are saying that Sisi is a tool of Israel, that he's somehow or another either an American or an Israeli puppet. Well, that's bad news for Mr. Sisi, the general, if he wants to stay in charge. And remember, the Muslim Brotherhood took over in Egypt under Obama. He went there and congratulated Mr. Morsi was the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood. Well, they were thrown out by a coup, and we all welcomed that because we were worried what that meant for Egypt. Well, remember that Hamas is an armed wing of the Muslim Brotherhood. Remember that Mr. Erdogan is the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood in the Middle East and in North America. All of these things begin to fall together, the pieces. And you have this understanding in Iran and Turkey that while they don't like each other and they disagree on things, they're not going to go to war with each other because they understand how pointless and destructive that is. But when it comes to Israel, they can agree. They don't like it. They don't think it should exist. And they're fed up and they're disgusted because we have failed to exercise restraint. We haven't restrained the Israelis. And you're not going to see anything happen in Washington. Everyone
they're all bought and sold. It seems like they've got some dirt on like every member of Congress or something. They really seem to be in the tank no matter what the cost for Israel.
Well, remember the lobby, and Professor Mearsheimer and his colleague wrote a book, Waltz, about the Israel lobby. And one of the things that people don't understand is that lobby, and they're not the only ones, by the way. There are other lobbies that operate this way. The pharmaceutical lobbies do business this way. The defense lobbies are similar. We want to support you, Congressman so-and-so, Senator so-and-so. We'd like to give you this money that will go into your political action committee to help reelect you. But if you're not going to support us, well, we'll just go over here to your opponent and he'll get all the money. And so you're in a tough position sitting on the Hill. Everyone worries in Congress all the time about reelection. Senators are there for 6 years. It's a different kettle of fish. But if you're only there for 2 years, you spend probably 50% of your time or more trying to beef up your reelection campaign because the next thing you know, it's reelection time. So they never really stop campaigning and they never really stop hunting for money. It's a terrible system. It doesn't work. That's why it's all back to the chief executive. Where is the chief executive? What's his vision? There is no vision. There is nothing from the White House. It's empty. And I know that the NSC staff and the National Security Advisor, they are very afraid. They have a tiger wandering through the neighborhood and they can't get it back into the cage because the tiger controls them. It's sort of wag the dog. We're the dog. We're being wagged. The dog is not in charge of his tail.
I want to talk about the double standards and the hypocrisy here. We heard from the State Department. We heard from the Pentagon, of course, after the special military operation into what was Eastern Ukraine, which is now Russia. And of course, to any of us who've been following what's been unfolding there since 2014, by all accounts, it was a genocide. The constant shelling of Donetsk, of the Donbass region since 2014. Thousands, tens of thousands of people killed, innocent people, residential buildings, playgrounds, etc. But the rest of the world was seemingly silent on that. Then Russia invades, and suddenly now it's Putin's genocide. And, you know, innocent people being killed, and the world needs to rally around and stop the evil Mr. Putin. Okay, so that was the narrative that was floating around out there, of course. And we try to shed light on the truth of this. Yes, innocent people have been killed, but it's not that narrative, and certainly not in those terms. But now we see tens of thousands of people being killed in Gaza. We know what happened on October 7th. We know the Hamas attacks. When you hear the State Department being asked direct questions, or the Pentagon yesterday or over the past few days being asked direct questions about how they judge genocide, like what metrics are you using here in the State Department and the Pentagon to judge when a country is carrying out genocide? It seems to be a double standard, but maybe I'm reading this wrong. What's your take on this?
Well, there is a definition for it. The UN has one. And I encourage people to look it up and read it, and then they can make up their own minds. I don't like the word genocide, frankly. I think you can make an argument that the Japanese in World War II, in many cases, waged what was probably genocidal warfare in China, killing millions of Chinese. We can be accused of waging a genocidal campaign against Japan, ultimately firebombing their cities and then delivering an atom bomb on two cities. Was genocide. I normally think of genocide as something that happened to the Jews. 6 million people are systematically murdered. To me, that's genocide. I don't like the word, but what I really don't like is as you point out, is a double standard. There is this attitude that whatever we do is always good and whatever everybody else does is always bad. We never step up and admit that, we flattened Dresden and Leipzig towards the end of the war when there was no reason to bomb anybody. We did a lot of things that were destructive and ultimately criminal during World War II, but then everybody did. The Soviets were probably the worst offenders, murdering millions of people as they advanced, including their own citizens. So I don't think it's something that's going to solve itself. I don't go down that road and debate it. I simply think that we need to end the fighting. Israel itself is at high risk in my judgment. If we want Israel to survive, it is now in our interest and in Israel's interest for this to halt, this killing in Gaza. If this goes on for another month, what we've been talking about, this slow but steady coalescing of forces in the region, that will reach a point where finally everyone says, that's it, no more, we're attacking. We have a holy obligation to the Muslim Arabs in Gaza and on the West Bank. They've all been through too much. We will attack. That's where we ought to focus right now. That's why we need to stop this thing. And there are Israelis that understand this. It's a slim majority at the moment that backs Netanyahu and what he wants to do, because everyone is emoting. They want revenge, revenge, revenge. They also think that they have to restore what they call deterrence. That is, if you kill any of us, all hell will visit you. You will pay an enormous price if you do this to us. The problem is that deterrence in that form is not going to be restored. The Muslims are no longer afraid as they were 50 years ago. They are stronger. They are more conscious of themselves. They're willing to fight. They are not afraid of us. Sending carrier battle groups, like sending battleships, doesn't frighten them anymore. They have the ability to protect themselves and to do enormous damage to us in Israel. They know it. We have to find a different way forward other than threatening and bullying people. That's true for us. It's true for Israel. No one is thinking like that in Washington, but that's what's needed. That's where you get good diplomacy. That's where you have some sort of sense of limitations. When you and I started talking about Ukraine, the biggest problem that we were facing in Ukraine from the very beginning was we thought our power was limitless, that we could do anything, that no one could stand against us. And we discovered we were dead wrong. Our resources are very limited. When you fight 6,000 to 7,000 miles away from home, you are limited. Well, we're limited in the Middle East, just as we were limited in Eastern Europe. We cannot do everything everywhere all the time with impunity. But no one wants to stand up and admit that there are limitations to our interests. There are.
I'll get you out of here on this, Colonel, which is what happens next in Gaza. And we heard from Benjamin Netanyahu in an interview this past week saying that they will basically control Gaza indefinitely. They will govern Gaza indefinitely. The United States says that's not a good idea. But again, you point out no one in Washington is doing anything or pulling any kind of strings at all. They're sort of puppets there of Israel right now. So with 70% of Gaza's population fleeing their homes, Israel says the massive tunnel network of Hamas has been, I think, almost more than half destroyed, so they say. So maybe this could be winding down. They will then control Gaza. If you're advising the President of the United States, what do you tell the President of the United States? To allow Israel to control Gaza or to get out and create a two-state solution? I mean, this is a big question, of course. It's not an easy answer. But what would you advise the President?
Well, first of all, if what you say is true, it may or may not be. This could last another month or more. Remember the Warsaw Uprising that involved 27,000, 30,000 Polish fighters against the Germans between 1 August and 1 October 1944. That was 60 days. Took the Germans 60 days to defeat them, kill large numbers of them. Then they completely flattened Warsaw and drove out the population. So that took 2 months. I'm not sure that the Israelis are as far along as they want to be. They probably had some success, but they haven't penetrated thus far the urban center. That's still to be done. I don't know how long that will take. But if we can't introduce some sort of third or fourth actor into the equation, if we can't turn to others and say, would you be willing to come in here and provide some sort of cover along the lines of what we created after the 73 war, which was a Sinai peacekeeping force, then I think the Israelis are going to take control of it and things will not improve. They will get worse because the Arab population is certainly not going to be happy to be policed in its streets and in its homes by the Israeli Defense Force. That's simply putting them in the same box that the people on the West Bank are in right now. And we in the West are not getting any news about what's happening on the West Bank. The Israelis are running raids there into various towns and cities. They're being accompanied by soldiers and settlers. Palestinian Arabs are being arrested on the slimmest of, or the thinnest of evidence. They're trying to keep a lid on what they fear could be a double uprising. In other words, an intifada in the West Bank while they're still fighting in Gaza. None of this is a solution. If the Israelis insist on holding on to and occupying Gaza, they better do it when there's no one there. In other words, when all the Arabs have been driven out. And I still think that is the goal for the Israelis at this point. They want to drive that population out, and it becomes someone else's problem, not theirs. Now, in defense, we should keep something in mind. During the Camp David Accords, Menachem Begin tried to give Gaza to Sadat in Egypt. And Sadat said, you've got to be kidding. That's too much trouble. We can't handle it. Right. We have our own problems inside Egypt. We move them into Sinai. How is that going to solve the problem? Because if you moved 2 million Arabs from where they are now into Sinai and built new settlements, do you really think that those Arabs are going to walk away from the country that they formerly lived in for 1,000 years and simply say, we're happy now? In other words, you're moving the problem a short distance. You're not solving the problem. And the solution evades everyone because even now, the two-state solution, I don't know how you get one at this point.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't think the Israelis will tolerate it. I think the Israelis regard anything on their border that they don't control as a potential criminal enterprise that has to be crushed. So I guess this thing has to burn itself out one way or the other. But right now, I think Mr. Netanyahu is doing exactly what we discussed. He's exploiting the opportunity that he thinks is almost a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to crush Israel's enemies. I hope that they do it quickly if they're going to do it. If this lasts another 30 days, I think all bets are off. The worst case scenario is eminently possible. I just hope we can put it off for another 30 days. I'm not sure that will work.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And again, remember, we speak from the standpoint of we're not with the Arabs. We want Israel to survive. I think Israel as an entity is an inherently good thing. It is very productive and very a positive member of the larger international community. But that's not the view in the region. Israel has no friends in the region. And if they had anybody that was willing to do business with them before, they have no one now.
Yeah, dark days ahead. And we'll watch over the next 30 days and we'll see how much control they have over Gaza over the next, you're seeing videos of tens of thousands of people being marched out of there. Where will they go? Where will they come back to? And who will govern? That is the greater questions over the next few weeks. Colonel Douglas MacGregor, great seeing you. Thanks as always for your insights. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Morris.
Thanks so much, Colonel. I love when he calls me Morris.
I like
Thank
that
you, Colonel.
I like that too.
And a lot of people in the chat wondering, like watching this right now, wondering, are we pro-Israel? Are we pro-it? No, we're pro-human beings. And we're very much, I don't know, I can't speak for you guys. I'm very much anti-genocide. Like, that's not a thing I like. So anytime large amounts of human beings are killed because of wars, I'm against that. I'm also against war. And so what sort of a solution can we come to? Can cooler heads prevail? But it doesn't appear that that's the case.
Yeah, there's never a time when you're going to convince me that a bomb was a good idea.
No, when you have Iran, when you have the United States striking 2 different Iranian bases this afternoon, and you have American soldiers being killed in Cyprus, like, was it an accident? We don't know. We won't know. They're military exercises, training for the Middle East. Like, I don't want anybody to die. I don't want anybody's son or daughter to die over this. And by the way, tomorrow on the show, we're going to dive more deeply into just why all of this is happening. Could it have something to do with natural resources? A lot of people here in the chat are like fighting back and forth, and of course people are fighting about their different ideologies and all of this, and over religions. It's like, look at the money. Follow the money in all of this. And they want us to be fighting. They want people to be arguing about this. They want people to be going on social media and having big fights about this. But follow the money. We're going to look more deeply at that this week here on the show. We've got a lot more to get to here on your Monday. We're going to look at ditching Ukraine, why the West seems to be saying, hey, Zelensky is done. And, we've had a number of people here specifically on this show, former CIA analyst Larry Johnson, who said he believed that Zelensky was going to be taken out and basically eradicated. And now there are signs that they are actively looking to replace him. Dethrone, get rid of Zelensky. We're going to look at how, the West has really started to ditch Ukraine. We're going to look more deeply at that. But first,
we want to tell you about our friends over at BioOptimizers because, hey, it's exciting. Black Friday time, and BioOptimizers Black Friday mega sale is happening now and will last through the entire month of November. And listen up, because this mega deal is only available for Redacted listeners with our code. So we all have those ever-growing Black Friday wish lists, but this year we want to challenge you to make your health a top priority, and particularly your sleep. So instead of those impulse purchases, focus on what really matters. And we all know the importance of sleep when it comes to overall well-being. And while some might say you can't buy a good night's sleep, well, you can buy some help to get a good night's sleep. And this is Magnesium Breakthrough by BioOptimizers. It's a game changer in the quest for a better night's sleep. You know this because we talk about how Clayton and I actually do take this all the time. It's the only product that we take at nighttime to put ourselves to sleep because it combines all 7 critical forms of magnesium into one convenient bottle. So keep in mind, when you supply your body with these essential magnesium forms, you're in for an incredible upgrade because magnesium supports a balanced inflammatory response, promotes healthy restorative sleep, relaxation, calmness, and better stress. BioOptimizer's Black Friday mega sale is happening right now through the entire month of November. So head on over to biooptimizers.com/redacted. You see it spelled there, and use our promo code Redacted. Again, this is your opportunity to stock up and reap all the amazing benefits it has to offer. And trust me, it's the best value you're going to find this Black Friday. You won't find it on Amazon or somewhere else. You got to use our code. Again, it's biooptimizers.com/redacted and use our code Redacted.
And thanks to our sponsors, because, we wouldn't be able to do this show without some of our sponsors who support independent journalism. So we've got some very brave sponsors who think about, they could choose to go to CNN or Fox or the mainstream media, and they're here with us supporting independent media and free speech. And that is very, very powerful. So thank you guys so much for supporting our sponsors. Like, if you're thinking about getting a supplement, we usually have about 3 sponsors per show. It's like a 90-minute show. It's up to you, but they support our show. And if you're thinking about, if you're getting a new bed or getting a new, getting a magnesium supplement, just consider supporting them because they support independent journalism. And I think it's very, very important in this day and age.
Yeah, it's great. You can tell I've got a little bit of postnasal drip from a cold a few days ago. And, I don't want to take too much of the hard stuff to knock myself out. So this helps you not feel hungover in the morning.
So if you subscribe to the show, your name will pop up here on the big screen. So go ahead and subscribe while you're watching live here. Yes, it will pop up here. And it'll also pop up on the bottom of the screen there as well. So subscribe. Thank you, guys.
All right. Well, let's turn our attention to Ukraine because they are out of young men. Where'd they all go?
Dead.
They sent them all off to war to die needlessly when they could have lived and we could have had a peace agreement over a year and a half ago. Ukraine has sacrificed an entire generation of young men so that President Zelensky could sell a war to the world. And now Time magazine is reporting that the average age of a soldier in Ukraine is 43. That's outrageous to think about how they're gone. This is the Time magazine article we talked about a couple weeks ago. We're going to talk a little bit more about it. But think about that. They've used up all of their young men. Now, we've been saying this for months, and we've been called Russian apologists. Now, Time magazine is saying this. Are they Russian apologists for looking at the fact that these men are needlessly dying for a war? Now, having sacrificed a whole generation, it seems like Ukraine is being thrown under the bus of the Western media, or rather dragged under the bus that is the U.S. war machine, and just doesn't seem to have a use for this war any longer. How do we know this? Well, here's one clue. The Time magazine cover that came out just about 2 weeks ago says, "Nobody believes in our victory like I do." Nobody. I think he meant that as like an inspiring quote, but instead it made him look like a delusional idiot. Now the Washington Post this weekend shows just how far they're willing to go to throw Ukraine under the bus with this hit piece where they published a claim saying they had studied and found that the Nord Stream 2 pipeline sabotage that happened last September was done by Ukraine. Interesting. Here's the headline. Now, they even name names. They say that it was a man named Roman Chervinsky. I'm not going to show you his picture for a second because you got to wait for it. This is good. They say this guy was the lead on the Nord Stream pipeline destruction and that he had deep ties to the Ukrainian military and worked as a special ops forces to lead a team of 6 special ops men. Okay, so picture this in your mind because this is literally how Jason Bourne movies begin, right? Opening scene is that he has gone on this deep sea diving operation to kill off this head of state, right? Do you remember this movie?
Yeah, he's in a boat going off to kill off.
Right. So if you know what it takes to this is the archetype of someone who can pull off special ops, deep sea diving. This is who the Washington Post wants us to think pulled this off. This guy is the Jason Bourne of Ukraine. So this, forgive me.
Like he wants to sell me a watch. He wants to sell me a knockoff watch in a pawn shop. That's
like in a bodega really or something.
No, Philip. Yeah, he is Jason Bourne, Ukrainian style.
He looks like Boris Karloff, doesn't he? Like
who?
Boris Karloff, the famous,
Yeah, the old actor.
Dracula, or what's his name, who played Boris Karloff in the Ed Wood movie. Like he looks like
a bit. Yeah. Now, I don't like to judge a book by its cover, but this guy is, forgive me, a bit gaunt and skinny. He led a 6-person special ops team to sabotage a major Russian gas pipe for Ukraine, which has no navy. Now, he's a convenient scapegoat because he is currently in prison, according to the Post. He has been in prison for this scheme that happened in June of 2022. So just 2 months before the Nord Stream pipeline, he was up to this, according to Ukraine. He's being held on charges that he abused his power stemming from a plot to lure Russian pilots to defect to Ukraine in July of 2022. And they arrested him just this April. Now, okay, if you're pulling off this Jason Bourne Nord Stream pipeline...
Bela Lugosi look. Sorry, it's Bela Lugosi. Thanks, Grim.
Okay. If you're pulling out, like if you're planning to pull off the Nord Stream pipeline, do you think you're maybe a little busy in the running up months to that? Or can you also be doing this plot that he was up to in July? Is that a fly by the seat of your pants kind of project? You would think you would.
When you're that close to Jason Bourne, I mean, that guy is basically Jason Bourne. I mean, look at him. When you're that close, you don't need planning to pull off something like that. You
don't think that guy needed training? Okay.
It's go time.
No,
Yeah.
look at the guy. Look at the guy. I mean,
You don't need.
Let's leave him on the screen for a little longer.
Like
Why do
Russians.
they pick these patsies to be these like Oswald? Like they're just little skinny guys.
Yeah.
Like they just make good patsies.
I mean,
I love that.
That's like Jason Statham is playing Jason Bourne. That's what I see there when I look at that.
Diego in our chat says, "LOL, that dude is like 102 years old."
Wet.
Yeah. Wet. Hey, but I will say this. Jacques Cousteau, was like, what, didn't he like die when he was like 100 years old? He did a hell of a lot of deep sea diving with his little blue hat, and he was gaunt and thin. So maybe he is leading some special ops team with no Navy to go down and blow up the Nord Stream pipeline. Totally gets off the United States off of the list.
Right, with no practice, right? Because he's busy doing this other scheme in July of 2022. We know the Nord Stream pipeline sabotage was September of 2002. So he didn't need practice. He was busy running other schemes. And then like, okay, I'm ready. Now I'm going to go, blow up some major gas pipeline, transatlantic. Okay. It's not transatlantic,
But I love that this Washington Post piece is like, yeah, the United States caught wind of it, but they thought then the plan had fallen apart. Like the U.S., which actively talked about blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline. President Biden at the podium talked about getting rid of the Nord Stream pipeline.
Right.
So too did Victoria Nuland. Like, we know this was their plan. And so the Washington Post says, yeah, the U.S. heard about this plan, but they didn't kind of believe it, and they thought it fell by the wayside.
They thought it had fallen through, so they didn't worry about it. Just like the October 7th attacks on Israel. Like, they maybe thought that it maybe could happen, but we just let that one slide and fell off the radar, I guess.
Yeah,
now, earlier this year, Zelensky had said that Ukraine did not blow up the Nord Stream pipeline, and he said that nothing like this would ever happen without him knowing. This was from a report earlier in this summer. But the Post report says that this so-called sabotage was approved by senior Ukrainian officials who reported to General Zaluny, Ukrainian's highest-ranking military officer. So either they're calling Zelensky a liar or saying he's incompetent and doesn't know what his Army and Navy and Special Ops is up to. And again, Clayton's right. The Post doesn't mention any U.S. involvement, even though we have credible reporting from Seymour Hersh that the United States Navy was involved with Norway. And actually, even though our Navy, has some pretty tough dudes, they had to practice. And they were practicing, according to Seymour Hersh, all summer. But they obviously didn't have this Ukrainian Jason Bourne.
They don't need to practice, right?
No, our Navy, according to Seymour Hersh, did need to practice.
Yeah. The U.S. Navy, who actually pulled this off, the United States and Norway, who actually blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, had to practice this, and they practiced it for a long time.
I mean, he had the
But this guy,
pools
Jacques
and stuff.
Cousteau, doesn't need to practice at all. Like, he's just so good at what he does.
Yeah.
That, he's like,
do you sometimes wake up and you're like, I think I'm going to go do this?
I've got a special set of skills. And I'm going to come for you, and I will find you.
Right.
Like, he's that good.
Even the plot of Jason Bourne, I'm sorry to keep going back to Jason Bourne, is just too good, is like he unfolds, like, how did I rent this boat? How did I get this scuba gear? How did he finds all the stuff. Even Jason Bourne had to prep for something like this. He couldn't be up to some kind of shenanigans in Ukraine in July of 2022 and then major sabotage. I know that's not a point that Jason Bourne couldn't do it, but it feels like one to me, so thank you for allowing me to make it. Now, again, this report is hard to believe, and it's bad for the media darling that is Zelensky. Now there are reports that he may be ousted for his refusal to negotiate a peace deal with Russia, a peace deal that the U.S. and the U.K. and NATO countries actively sabotaged. in March and April of 2022, meaning the war could have been a matter of weeks, but now we have it for over a year, about a year and a half. And here is a former Ukrainian presidential advisor saying she thinks that this hard line by Zelensky not to negotiate peace will cost him the job, and that he'll be ousted by his own government that may start thinking that peace is a good idea. Ukrainian officials might start thinking, you know, maybe there was something to this peace idea. Why? Because look at this. This is from footage from a cemetery in Kharkov.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
This is a new cemetery, by the way. So, you know, there's a lot of people in the West that are like, hey, if Ukraine is really losing this war, then show us the graves. We don't believe that it's happening. Oh, it's not enough when Antony Blinken went and walked through graveyards. Here's brand new graveyards for you. So an entire generation destroyed by NATO. Young men gone. And the average age of the military now in Ukraine is 43 years old. 43. The United States, you can't even join the United States military if you're over 41 years old. And the average age now in Ukraine is 43. An entire generation just wiped away.
It's horrible. It's horrible. Over the weekend, there was a viral video that I wasn't able to verify, but there was a woman who was surrendering to the Russian army in Ukrainian military gear. And she says, don't shoot me, I'm pregnant. And the Russian soldiers are like, what the F are you doing out here? You know, get the heck over here. And they rescue her. So we don't know that that's true. These are viral videos at this point. But if it's got to this point where they're now using pregnant women and elderly men, I mean, 43 is not elderly. I'm 45. But older men past a military age, you know, obviously what we've been saying all along is that the West wants to drag this war out to the last Ukrainian is true. And it needs to have stopped over a year and a half ago. Now, the truth about this war, that the people in the Donbass have been being terrorized by Ukraine for over 10 years, and that those people asked Russia to protect them and then voted to join Russia, that is something that is now being said in public. So we have been called Russian stooges for it. Having never been to Russia, we read no Russian, but that's what we're called because we're saying something that's inconvenient. Well, now
my favorite is Putin puppets.
Putin puppets, yeah. Someone once said Clayton was married to, who was it? The Dmitry Peskov,
yeah. They said it was, yeah.
That was Clayton's husband. That's weird. Clayton is married to me.
Yeah.
Not that guy. So yeah, we've taken all kinds of crap for saying this for a long time because we're reading. That's it. And we don't like war narratives. But at least now that's being said in public by very few people, but on a mainstream stage. I don't know if you caught this, but last week, presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy said this truth about this war at the Republican debates, mostly to war lover Nikki Haley.
She loves war.
She loves it. She loves war like Chanel suits.
Yeah.
I don't know who is falling for that war rhetoric, but I saw a tweet this weekend. It was like, someone needs to take her phone because all she wants to do is get on Twitter and go after a new war every single day. If you support her, please tell me why. Do you love war too? I would like to know. Anyway, this is what he said to her and in response to the war in Ukraine. And he also said it to the press, which has been absolutely complicit in these war lies. Watch.
Okay, hang on. Sorry, we're gonna have to replay that. Apparently, it was. Apparently, there was no audio, so I gotta.
Oh,
check
I'm
something real
sorry.
quick
He
and
was
we'll play
dropping
again.
tooth bombs, guys.
I heard it.
Yeah, wait for it again. Because...
Yeah, we could hear it. We could hear it.
Okay.
So apparently they couldn't.
I couldn't.
So.
All right.
Weird.
You're going to
couldn't
have
hear
to
it?
watch it again because it's great.
No, I didn't
Sorry.
hear it.
Oh,
It's
you had pressed pause. You had cut the audio on that last graveyard.
Yeah. So now I'm trying to
Okay.
put that back up. Okay. So now let's see if it goes. 1 second.
Nope. Still not going.
Oh.
Yeah, it's going.
I don't hear it.
All right. So they cut his mic, but he got a lot in there. I was thoroughly impressed with that, actually, because those are the things we've been saying for a really long time, not because we want them to be true, but because they are true.
That's why Tucker, it was one of the reasons Tucker was fired. You know, like, you can't say that stuff on mainstream television. You
Yeah.
can say it here on Redacted. We've been saying it since the beginning of the war. But you can't say, and we, by the way, we've been banned multiple times and blocked multiple times here on the show. So, you know, and YouTube has taken us off and so forth. So you can't say this on mainstream media. Like NBC was like, oh my God, hit the panic
Her
button.
face when he's like, this, you want to support a country that's banning Christians? And she's like, yes, I do.
Yes,
I want that.
She's like, I know it's
War is
inconvenient.
fine.
She's like, it's fine that, you know, that's fine that there's thousands of Christians in Gaza that are being killed as well. Like, shh, don't talk about it. You're not allowed to talk about it. We have to just pretend that that doesn't happen, that Christians are fine. No, they're being killed. They're being killed and they're being marginalized and they're being banned all over the place. And we can't talk about it. It's inconvenient for the mainstream media to talk about it. Go ahead, David.
I just wanted to say I love when he called her Cheney in heels.
Yeah. Or who is it? Paul Joseph Watson called her Republican Hillary Clinton. I liked that too.
Well, I mean, or it was either him or her or DeSantis in heels, like, you know, because DeSantis wears heels. So I think it was part of that. I don't know exactly, but yeah. So it was a great moment. Yeah, it was a great moment calling this out. I think you're seeing some awareness now in the West. You're seeing some major publications. You're seeing Time Magazine. You're seeing some other other publications
Well,
putting
at
this
least
out.
Vivek Ramaswamy said something that was honest when he was asked. It's dishonest for the mainstream media to have championed this war for so long, making Zelensky this poster boy, this media darling, and then all of a sudden it's not the sexy war anymore. It seems like the deep state doesn't want it, so they just comply. They have owed us the truth since March of 2024 and beyond, and before that, for as long as those people in the Donbass have been being bombed, and they've refused. So this is very convenient and journalism, and I will not applaud it all of a sudden that they're like, oh, well, we don't want this war anymore.
Let me just say something about the Vivek comments here, if I can, David, because like Shadow Files in the chat says, who cares? Vivek will say anything to be accepted. F him. And then Ottawa says, is Vivek controlled opposition? So is someone like behind Vivek putting him out there as controlled opposition? Great question. Who knows, right? Who knows, right? But will he say anything to be accepted? Perhaps. But let's just take him at how he answered that specific question. And answered it honestly. And it's like, we can throw people out. You can throw babies out with the bathwater.
Sure.
Right? And
Yeah.
I think just on that point, that's the point we're talking about here is Ukraine tonight. We're not talking about his other policy positions right now in China or other things like that. We're talking specifically about Ukraine in this segment right now. And so we're not running Vivek through an entire washing machine to try to decide all of his different policies, right? I think it's just we're talking about that specific question, and it was brave, and on that stage full of war hawks who actively want to continue sending billions of dollars to Ukraine.
Yeah, well said. What were you going to say,
and I just
David?
wanted to point out, too, if you look at the polls after the event, Vivek won by the people, the majority. Then the news articles on the mainstream media were all saying that he lost. So if you look at the people that are just saying what people want them to say, that's all the rest. He's saying things that nobody wants him to say, right? So that's the difference, in my opinion. And so he's winning by, according to the people, like huge percentage. Like Patrick Bet David did one with like 150,000 votes, and it was like 80-some%. Dave Rubin did one that was like 80%, even though he supports Haley. So he's not saying what he would be saying if he wanted to get in office. He's saying the opposite.
Yeah, and people are saying, oh, he's pulling a Trump, right? He's saying he's attacking people on stage, and he's calling out war hawks.
I don't care about his personality.
Right.
At this point, he has said something true that has been kept from us. That's all we're saying, okay? So if you wanted to talk about like who he is, if he's virtuous or what have you, read his book, see what you actually think about him. Clayton and I both have. He has positive and negatives. That's not what we're here for. He has presented a truth that we have been following for a long time. I'm shocked that it was said, and we owe it to the rest of our country to let that truth like rise up and not be suppressed by all the lies.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, let us know. And yeah, you're free to tell us what you think of Vivek Ramaswamy if you want, or Zelensky, or Ukrainian Jason Bourne.
Let us
all
know.
of that.
Let us know in the chat. Hey, we got more news to get to here on your Monday. Can you believe it? It is Monday. We're going to talk about Army recruitment in the schools. And do you want Army recruiters going to your 7th grade class, middle school exactly, and secondary schools? We'll answer that question in just a moment. We'll show you what the Biden administration is trying to do to try to get those recruitment numbers up in a second. And how about a man explaining endometriosis? Mansplaining. A trans man, biological man, wants to be the leader of the endometriosis something.
A charity.
Charity. Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. That'd be like me being the head of a breast cancer awareness charity, right?
Men get breast cancer. Men do not get endometriosis.
Well,
I've got some examples. Don't worry. We're going to get to it.
Okay, good. We got all of that. So stick around for that. I'm trying to think of something that, well, I can't. I could think of different.
It's like me being the poster child for prostate cancer.
Okay, yes, you do not have a prostate.
I cannot get prostate
It would be like
cancer.
you writing the vagina monologues.
Right, like I do not have a vagina. I do not. I do not. So I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that. We're going to get there in a second. But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at Moomoo, because are you looking to get 16 free stocks? Wouldn't you love to get 16 free stocks just for signing up with a great brokerage account that allows you to trade, buy commodities, buy stocks, and learn all at the same time? That's our friends over at Moomoo. It's our favorite trading platform. There's no steep learning curve. It has a simple interface. It's easy to use, so even beginners can take advantage of the stock market in no time. Plus, it offers powerful tools often reserved for experienced investors, like customizable watch lists and advanced charting capabilities. You get that all for free. You don't have to pay for level 2 quotes. You don't have to pay for all of the stuff that you pay for on some of those other platforms. I know. I've spent money on them on other platforms. You get it for free right here. And for a limited time, you get 16 free stocks just for signing up when you open your account and make your initial deposits. It's that simple. And our friends over at Moomoo are now available in Canada and Australia as well. They've just recently opened up in Canada and Australia, so take advantage of that as well. You can download their app on iOS, on Android, on your Mac, on your PC. It doesn't matter. They have a great app for all these different platforms. It's easy to use. Again, get 16 free stocks right now when you open up your account. So you get your initial 15 free stocks, plus they're giving away a free stock of SoFi. Yes, they're giving SoFi, which just had a really good earnings call just a few weeks ago. So check them out. You get a free SoFi stock as well. So go there right now, redacted.inc/Moomoo to get those free stocks and get trading today. Even if you do nothing else with these stocks, just keep them in your account. It's free money. Then you can trade them later on if you want. Just sit on them for a while this volatility in the stock market goes up and down and up and down. Just keep them in there and let them grow for a few years, and then sell them a few years later and you made some good money, hopefully. So there you go. Go to redacted.inc/Moomoo today. That's redacted.inc/Moomoo today. And no, you don't need to make that massive deposit. Ryan's like, just put $15,000 in there. No, you don't need to do that. No, you don't at all. You have to make an initial deposit, but trust me, it's not $15,000. That's not the case. So there you go. All right. So we got more news to get to here on your Monday. So we get my notes up here. If you do subscribe to the channel, your name will pop up here on the big board, on the big tote board. So please subscribe if you're watching us. Totes, thanks so much. I appreciate it. Well, something really interesting is starting to happen more and more at our nation's schools. More and more military recruiters are showing up during your child's school day. I don't know if you've noticed this or not, if your children have come home and say, hey, during lunch today, there were a bunch of soldiers in our lobby. Like, what the heck's going on? They had a whole table on like Army stuff, and they were talking about submarines, and they were talking about, tanks, and they were talking about all sorts of stuff. We're not talking high school here. We're talking 7th grade on up, middle school. More on that in a second. But first, a question for you. I'll ask you in the audience here. Let me know in the chat below. Should military recruiters be allowed to come into your schools and recruit kids to join the military? Well, you might have noticed an uptick in this effort at your local schools. Parents have been letting me know, and you can let me know in the comments below. Have you noticed this at your kids' schools? Ask your kids, do they notice this? Let me know, because last week when I asked you, would you send your kids to die in the coming Middle East war or a war with China, not one of you said yes. I'd sacrifice my son or daughter for these, big money elites that are running these wars. No, I'm not going to sacrifice my son or daughter for that, or a war against Iran, or any other boondoggle the Biden administration can come up with. Wants to send our military on. So KT, one of our viewers, KT just posted this on our. So KT, if you're watching, thank you for the comment. KT said, hell no, my grandsons will not go. Recruiters are hitting the schools. My grandsons were smart enough to tell them that no way, and especially no way, would Forrest Gump Joe Biden be their commander-in-chief. Also, she says, I come from 3 generations of military, and I know how they lie, telling you everything they know you want to hear. And I know that it's nothing like it used to be, she says. Thank you, KT. Well, recruiters are now doubling down on secondary schools. Yes, 7th graders on up can be forced to meet with recruiters. Now, they've had this in place since 1965, so this is not new. They've been allowed to do this. It's law under the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965, which you can see right here. You can read it for yourself. You can go right through the Armed Forces Code and in this law specifically if you want to. I did today, going through all of this. And you can see the opt-out process. If a parent of a secondary school student doesn't want this, it can submit a written request to the local school and all of this stuff. So there's a bunch of things here, and this has been in place since 1965. Any school, though, that is receiving government funding must give military recruiters access to their students. You get the money, you give us access to your kids. That's how it works. Oh, you want this money? Let us walk around during your lunchtime and talk to 7th graders about tanks and what it would be like to, fight some Russians, I guess, like Red Dawn. Tell them about the benefits of going to war in Iran. Of course, this was instituted in the year 1965. Do you guys know what else happened in 1965, of course? The Vietnam draft. So in many ways, the draft at that time was simply totally trumped everything they were doing in schools. They didn't need to do recruiting efforts in schools. I mean, why? Because they had the military draft. So that really trumped it, right? So military recruiters didn't even have to go to schools to try to persuade you. You had no choice. This provision never really has been enforced, and schools have been fighting back, actually, ever since. In fact, the Associated Press just reported that most schools have put their foot down. But a new move by the Biden administration is doubling down on its efforts to reach young children in poor and urban areas.
Wait. So you're saying, let me get this straight. The government took wartime powers in 1965 and didn't give them back? That's interesting.
Right. Well, yeah. Well, they put this law in place and they never wound it back. They never...
Right.
Yes, exactly. I know.
That's
so
unusual.
Shocking, really.
They tend to do that.
Yeah.
Here's from the Associated Press. Let me read this from the AP article. Army recruiters struggling to meet enlistment goals say one of their biggest hurdles is getting into high schools where they can meet students one-on-one. But they received a recent boost from a recruiting advocate whom school leaders couldn't turn away. The Secretary of the Army. Now, remember, the Associated Press, keep this up on your screen. The Associated Press is a mouthpiece of the CIA, of the Pentagon, essentially. So the Associated Press, the New York Times, the Associated Press is one of the lead news organizations that is a mouthpiece of the United States Pentagon, the Defense Department. So, of course, they're giving a glowing piece about how the Secretary of the Army is showing up at schools to try to talk to kids about the military. It's a glowing piece, right? So it says, during 3 days of back-to-back meetings across Chicago last month, Army Secretary Christine Wormuth spoke with students, school leaders, college heads, recruiters, and an array of young people involved in ROTC or junior ROTC programs. Again and again, she asked, what can the Army do to better reach young people and sell itself as a good career choice? In blunt sessions, I love this, in blunt sessions, recruiting leaders told her they need more and better access to high school students. So all of these like junior ROTC, they're like, we need to get on high schools. We need to go to middle schools. But they said the atmosphere can at times be unfriendly or worse with school leaders, many of whom are skeptical that the Army offers a good career option for their students. Quote, I'm going to use the word hostile, one recruiter told her. There's no other word to use. Oh. So in other words, let's go into these disadvantaged schools, and instead of talking about other career opportunities or improving these schools to give these kids more of a leg up in society, no, instead we'll tell these kids, hey, forget college, and look, you're kind of, you're not really going to go very far anyway. So military, it's the best option for you. We need bodies. We need warm bodies to throw in the Middle East.
Well, this is how David Goggins became a speaker, is that he started to recruit for the SEALs.
The Navy,
the SEALs and the Navy and the Special Rangers.
Right.
So he was, and he's such a gregarious character that he made a name for himself by recruiting other kids in schools.
Right, and they loved putting him out there for that,
and,
right? Like
there's something to that. Like he had nothing. He was going nowhere until.
But instead of fixing the problem, though, my point is like, okay, so we're going to throw billions of dollars and send military recruiters into schools, and instead of fixing the schools and like lifting up these like liberal cities which have been destroyed, no, we're going to throw them billions of dollars from the Pentagon and tell them, the only way out for you is either to try to play basketball or join the military. We need you to go to the Middle East.
It's incredibly racist. Yeah, you're right.
Well, and remember back like before Iraq and all that the first time, they had like the GI Bill. You could go, you went into non-wartime, you could make a career out of the military, you could get some college and schooling and stuff like that. And now you're basically just joining and you're automatically infantry because there's a war somewhere they can send you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they're not going to keep you. They need you now trained and ready to go. And, chances are that you're going to be stuck in Oklahoma City somewhere, just manning drones is highly unlikely. So yes, our infantry ranks have diminished significantly. Military recruitment is at a multi-decade low right now. Who wants to, after all these woke policies? So maybe this will work for them. They need bodies right now. But I thought these schools had to let recruiters in, don't they? I mean, that's the law since 1965. So I'm not sure where the hostility is coming in here, right? Well, they do have to let them in, but there's been really no enforcement of this law, I've learned. So the idea is, you've got to let these recruiters in, and if you don't, you'll lose your government funding. So, but it's not really happening. It hasn't really been enforced, but don't worry about it. Ohio Representative Max Miller from Ohio's 7th District this summer introduced a new bill to make sure that these schools open their door and let recruiters in, or you'll lose your funding. It's called, here's the bill on your screen, H.R. 4522. Now, it's an amendment to that 1965 law. And he's basically, even though it's already on the books, the bill is to amend the 1965 measure to ensure access. It's basically saying, hey, that's an old law. It doesn't seem like it's being enforced. We really want to ensure it, though, this time. That's really all it is. The language is pretty brief. It's a short amendment, and it basically just doubles down and basically forces the Secretary of Defense to, have that additional authority. It's ridiculous. The bill basically says, hey, that law that was passed in 1965 that gives recruiters access to schools, and if you don't do it, you can lose your school funding? Yeah, that bill. Well, let's actually start enforcing it now.
Or withhold funding from schools that are already scoring so crappy.
Right. So we'll take away even more funding because you don't want to let recruiters in to spend their day during your lunch break. It also requires schools to provide students' names, home addresses, and telephone listings to military recruiters so they can show up at your house as well. This is in the law. Telephone, home address, student's name. Hey, that kid was kind of eyeing me up during school over there when I was there, during lunch. I need to find out who that kid is. I'm going to show up at his house later tonight and talk to him, that 8th grader.
Yikes.
So the U.S. military has a massive recruitment problem. So is this the way to solve it? Or is a draft coming next? Because again, this 1965 law coincided with a military draft. Are we repeating history here again right now? Or is this going to be totally separate? And
I would say that it's not so much a recruitment problem, it's an image problem. The U.S. military has an image problem across the world, and it's not like young kids don't see it. My daughter's seen this like her whole life. She grew up with this. It's sort of like all of the just like the bombing of civilians, like all of the wars that we're starting. It's like, this is not unknown. It's an image problem. It's not that people don't want to go to the military. They don't want to go to that military specifically.
Right.
I wouldn't.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. So let us know your comments on this. And your thoughts on this. Would you let your kids join the military right now? It's unbelievable. So this is what they're polling right now. We got more news to get to here on the show, and we're going to talk about a man with it's even hard to say for a man. Endometriosis, a man with endometriosis.
Well, maybe if you were dressed as a woman, you would understand it. You're not in costume. So we'll get to that. But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at Lear Capital, because it's no secret, if you're tuned in, you know that experts are predicting a recession heading our way. Layoffs are already happening, and the government is ready to print more money, further devaluing the U.S. dollar. While last year was terrible for most investors, 2023 could be worse unless you were smart and invested in gold. Then you were protected from loss where other investments fail. If the experts are right and we do get hit by a recession, 2023 is looking even better for gold and silver investors. So if you're interested in investing in gold or even learning about it, then Lear will help you start purchasing precious metals or converting part of your IRA or 401k into gold and silver IRA. Call Lear Capital today at 800-613-3557 or go to LearRedacted.com. Now, right now, if you buy 1 ounce of gold, Lear Capital is giving away a free ounce of silver. That's incredible. Free silver that you can keep or sell immediately or whatever. There are, of course, a lot of gold and silver companies to choose from, but our friends at Lear have over 25 years of experience, thousands of 5-star reviews, and risk-free guarantee that helps give you 24 hours to review your purchase before committing to it. Lear Capital is a top choice, and they'll help you just learn what you're doing as well if you're new. So call Lear at 800-613-3557 or go to LearRedacted.com and get your free gold and silver investor guide and receive up to $15,000 in free bonus medals with a qualified purchase. So again, to learn more, go to LearRedacted.com or call 800-613-3557. All right, well, men know more about women's bodies than women do. That was the crystal clear message from a women's charity in the UK that appointed this person as their new CEO. This is Steph Richards, a trans identified male. I've told you how I'm going to use those terms. This person was born a boy and goes as a girl. He told Pink News that he spent over 30,000 pounds on a sex change because they were really concerned that even with all of this costuming, that his death certificate may not recognize that he says he's a woman. Here is that article from earlier this year. So it's the gender ID law is something that they've spoken about a lot, about the fact that the birth certificate and the IDs say that he's a woman, but he's really worried also about the death certificate. Although if you dig this person up, years and years later, their DNA will also recognize him as a man, and there's nothing you can do about that. So I don't know if that keeps him up at night or not. The announcement of Steph as the new CEO of the South Coast Endometriosis Center was met with so many mad tweets on Twitter from adult human females. So much so that the society later apologized on Twitter, not because they appointed a man to represent an endometriosis charity, but because of this quote. Take a look at the quote from the announcement. It says, "Isn't it ridiculous that I've got to my 40s before any medical professionals even mentioned endometriosis?" Now, that looks like Steph, the man, might have said something like that, and that's inappropriate because Steph's doctor would not tell that person about endometriosis, given that Steph lacks a uterus. Endometriosis is a painful disease that causes the tissue lining on the outside of the uterus to grow and become inflamed. It often is associated with infertility. It's a nightmare for many women. It's not something that Steph and his doctor would just play around with to discuss in order to affirm Steph's gender identity. The comments on this post are scathing. Women are furious that a man pretending to be a woman would step in to speak for this uniquely female condition. Now, of course, I want to acknowledge that men do often research and are experts at female health. I had a man deliver my first child. Remember? He was handsome. Do you remember that guy? I'm just seeing if you're paying attention.
I'm paying attention.
Okay.
Wait, Clayton.
What the hell?
Clayton delivered your delivered your first baby.
My mom.
I'm not a doctor, but I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night.
My mom called the guy who delivered my son. He's like, "Your OB is handsome. That's Dr. Cutie." Anyway, I just gave that an aside to see if Clayton's paying attention. He is. He doesn't
Always.
like it when I talk about that doctor that way.
Yeah, especially that.
Okay. Where was I? Okay.
I don't know.
So, yes, I just want to acknowledge that, yes, of course, men can be medical experts when it comes to women's health. But the man who has, I've had a few male OBs before, they never try to convince me that they know what I'm going through by experience, or that they also are a woman, or they know better than me what it feels like. Now, when one woman challenged this on Twitter saying this should be an outrage, Steph, the new CEO of this endometriosis, said, "Listen, girl, I was researching issues around pregnancy and women's health well over 2 decades ago. Strangely, in those days, sex didn't come into it. Pregnancy and women's health had nothing to do with sex." So says Steph. "I have offered to share my knowledge with you, so to improve your books, but you refused to meet me." Now, I thought to myself, okay, did Steph publish research on women's health and maybe they're equivalent to my male OB. No, let's zoom in on this proof that they provided. These are just printouts of articles that Steph was reading in 2006. Steph is not the author of these things. Steph was just proving to us that they were reading this in 2005 and 2006 because of the date stamp on articles about women's health. Just that they've been reading this, not that they're actually...
Oh my gosh.
He's like, I printed these out and I've been reading.
This opens so many more job opportunities for me. I didn't realize all I had to do was read articles. I'm going to go be a doctor now. What am I doing here?
Yeah, that's all you need to do.
I probably printed
Screw
some
you
random
guys. I'm going to NASA.
Yeah.
I'm going to NASA. I watch PBS Space Time every new episode. I've been doing this for years.
SpaceX.
SpaceX
is hiring, Philip. I think just because you read a few articles or watched a few YouTube videos.
No, you have to have printed them.
Oh,
you
yeah,
have to have
print them.
printed them in 2006.
Who the hell prints articles?
I can go back.
Or start printing things now. And then 10 years later, like if I just print out something right now that says that I can, perform open heart surgery, then maybe I can do it, right? So the proof
I have a
there.
Photoshop expert that can change the date on them for
Okay.
me, so.
Yeah, that's
true. Yeah, you're right.
He didn't think about that.
Yeah. Well, Steph sure showed that lady with her printouts of women's articles. That settles it. Steph's an expert.
Yeah.
Now, another question is whether or not Steph can take time out from advocating for trans rights to properly address women's rights, because those things are not the same. They are diametrically opposed. Steph is busy going to these rallies for trans rights and rallying parliamentary members. Here's a picture of them doing just that. Steph also regularly tries to debate with women who say that they're women. I might say even accost or harass. Here's their account of seeing a woman wearing a T-shirt that said adult human female, and that really upset Steph. And so goes up to this woman wearing the shirt and says, "Can we talk about this? I'm trans. You shouldn't be wearing that shirt." And the woman refused, even though she was with two mates. So, Steph wants debates and conflict with actual women. There are other proof online that Steph has shown. There was a person who said they were a sexual assault survivor and were groomed. And Steph says, "No, you weren't. You weren't groomed. Nobody groomed you." So Steph is not shooting.
Can I ask a question real quick? Sorry. Is the adult human female some kind of like signal? I don't understand how that would just, if I saw somebody wearing that T-shirt, I would think that was funny. What is the signal? What is the
right? I'd be like, "Oh, that's a funny shirt." Fine, yeah. And I would go up to that person and be like,
It's kind of a turf costume. Like, it shows to trans activists that you think that a woman is an adult human female, and that definition is very offensive to trans people. To define a woman as an adult human female is offensive, and they don't like it. And so the shirt itself is a signal that you are not down with other people's gender ideology. And so, yes, that shirt in and of itself is something that will get you. And in fact, I think like even kids have been kicked out of school for wearing it. There was a young boy in Massachusetts, I believe, who wore a T-shirt that said there are only two genders, and got suspended for it or sent home or what have you. So anyway, this is the guy that they think that can represent women with endometriosis in between all the trans debates that he's busy having. I wonder if the charity will now listen to the hundreds of pissed off ladies that are replying to these announcements on Twitter or X. To their credit, they did not turn off comments to these announcements, because I guess, a female charity silencing women over a man would be seen as bad optics. So they're just taking it. It's kind of, fun to watch, I would say. This brings to mind this incident last year when a group in Scotland decided to not hire a man they had originally decided to hire as a period dignity regional lead officer. That was literally his title, period dignity officer. What helps me feel dignified about my period is not having it mansplained by a man. At least this man was not like trying to dress the costume.
So important for a man. I was gonna say, let me tell you why it's so important for a man to tell you about your period, Natalie.
Okay, I'm listening.
Right, just couldn't resist.
I'm all ears. Yeah, I mean, at least it wasn't a man dressed in women costume. You know, that makes it worse. But this guy, I wouldn't let any guy near my daughter to do that. You know, that was just like some bloke that was not a doctor. So, you know, this is an outrage. It goes without saying, but this charity is thinking that they're doing a good thing. Here is a sarcastic post from one of the many comments on this, and I thought that this was kind of funny, from a fellow gender critical woman. Sums it up nicely. She says, I'd like to announce my appointment as chief womansplainer of male pattern baldness. As you can see, being both female and blessed with a disturbingly massive head of hair, there's no one better qualified for this position. I look forward to patronizing follically challenged men. Okay.
I love it.
Yeah, that's the equivalent. So if how do you like that? How do you like them apples? Let me know what you think. Is it totally fine for Steph, who read printed articles in 2006, to tell us what it's like to fight endometriosis? Or
did she also print out pictures of uteruses?
Maybe. Or do you think, were there literally no women available who could maybe speak for this better? You know, are women going to be comfortable talking to somebody who, clearly Steph has autogynephilia, which is the fetishizing of women's conditions, and wants to present as a woman, which is fine. Let Steph do that, right? But as someone, women who are suffering this really painful and awful condition maybe deserve a room with people who are not fetishizing women's conditions and just take it as it is with no ideology at all. Just a thought. So let us know what you think of that in the chat below.
We have a lot of good people in the chat tonight. Good to see all of you guys. I love, yeah, people saying this is a clown world. Let us know your thoughts on this. Tom, good to see all of you guys. Shinobi is here. And Melissa Dozier is here. Demonic Ideologies. Tom Barry says,
That's...
Whoa, prostate.
Oh, I was like, demonic ideologies is someone's chat name? No.
No.
Okay, that's just what somebody was saying. Like, how'd you get in here?
Yeah. Manimus on Rumble chat says, no, it's not fine. Send Steph to a mental hospital. Yes, it is defined as a mental condition.
Steph says it's not. It is. Yes. It is.
It's unbelievable. I have a friend who was telling me, like, up in Canada, and they're trying to make Vancouver, I think, like really like the trans, I don't know, gay capital of Canada or something, but you can't even walk across the street. There's literally just trans flags, gay flags, every storefront, everywhere.
You better not wear that adult human t-shirt then.
Oh my gosh.
Adult female.
Well, that's just kind of like so interesting because like I honestly would not have made that connection. If I saw that, I'd have taken it like somebody wearing like a generic brand shirt as a joke. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like just adult human feel like that's just funny to me. If I was walking along, I would see that as funny. I would not have made any connection.
You're gonna get punched in the face by a trans activist. I mean,
yeah, but
I can punch back.
It's the equivalent of people wearing the F Joe Biden shirts, right? You know that it's going to invoke something because you know exactly what it means.
Yeah.
And so that person knows what it means, and the trans people know exactly what it means too.
Mario PL says those are not flags. Those are not flags. I guess, yeah, that's a great point. I mean, it's not like it's a state flag. It's not like it's a country flag. It's just like I don't know. What do you call it then? I mean, I'm just curious. That's a good point.
It's
a banner. A banner. Yeah, I guess that would just be a banner. Transcouver, Infectus guy says up in Transcouver. Yeah. All right. Let us know your thoughts on that. Hey, we should mention we have a community, and it's great to support independent journalism. It's free. It's free to watch our show on Rumble, on YouTube, on Twitter. You can watch us for free. But if you'd like to become a Redacted Plus member, where you get access to interviews and special live streams and content that you will not get other places, also just to support our show. We can't do this show without you guys. We really can't. The cost of our staff, our servers, all of it. We're not billionaires. We do not have Vanguard money or BlackRock money or Pfizer money or any of that crap. We are supported by you. And if you want to come over and become a Plus member for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support us. It's like our own version of Patreon. So, all you need to do is go to redacted.inc, and we have it built on our own website. It's very simple to do. I'm sorry, we built it on Locals, but Locals has been fantastic. So it's like our own Patreon basically set up on Locals. So just come on over, join the conversation. Go to redacted.inc, and like I said, for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support this show if you find any value in it. If you enjoy watching us live every Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern time, we love having you guys here. So it's great to have you guys. Really appreciate that.
All right, that's going to do it for us. Hopefully, I come back tomorrow with a normal voice. This is not it.
I like it.
This is not awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
All right.
I always, when I get a cold, I wish I could keep the voice. Like, I like that.
But it
raspy,
hurts. It kind of, it feels yucky.
In that case. Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, okay, then I'm going to be done. We will see you back here tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining us today, you guys. We had a really great group, and we appreciate your conversation and your participation and your presence. And we will see you here tomorrow, same time, same place.
Thank you, Derek. A member for over 2 years now. Top-notch work. Much love to you guys. Have a great night, everyone.